I think everybody kind of searches, for that. I think what my wife and I learned was that I've got this thing that I want to do. Why does that burn in my belly so much? What if I can't support my family? What if it doesn't? Mentors are good only for the path that they have taken. If you can't find a mentor that fits your path, that sounds like...
Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content and this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Today Count show. My name is Winston. I will be your host today. And I have with me... as always, the man, the myth, the legend, Jim Piper.
Gonna do that again.
Always. Well, you can't not. I mean, I feel like that's kind of our thing. I don't know. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing well.
Doing good.
Yeah.
Doing good. Glad to have you. And then we got no stranger to the podcast because you got one under your belt. So now you're a pro, but
I sure do.
Greyson Hanna.
A friend of the show.
What's
always happy
on?
To be here. Thanks, guys.
Come on. Last time we were all together, we had the opportunity to talk about living with purpose. Jim, you gave us this kind of just framework of understanding, man, how do we live with intentionality? A lot of us who are watching, listening, us in the room here, we're constantly asking ourselves, how do we get better? How do we manage not just our time, but our life better? We want to be more effective. We got parents listening. We got business leaders listening. We have teachers. We have pastors, all kinds of people. And sometimes it feels like, man, there's not enough time in the day for all of the things that we are responsible for. And at the end of the day, we just want to get better. We want to be good stewards of what has been entrusted to us. And so we're going to stay in this vein. And if you need to check out that first part of this conversation, that link should be available in the show notes. And you can jump on the Today Count show on YouTube or wherever you stream podcasts to catch that previous episode as well. But we're going to continue this conversation today and kind of almost rapid fire Q&A with Jim and just kind of let him field some of the questions that are kind of boring, if we're being honest, just out of, at least for me, Greyson, I don't know about you, but just life tension. Like, man, how do I manage, the responsibilities and the things that are going on? And, there's going to be a thematic answer to what we're talking about. And Jim, can you just maybe refresh our memory about this thing called a playbook?
A playbook. Yeah. Playbook. That it was something that I created with the help of people like Stephen Covey, other business leaders who created a path, to follow. And just like your clothes and Greyson's clothes, I like your clothes, but they may not fit me exactly right. So I search for clothes that fit me well. And so but in the process of building a playbook that works for me, a strategic plan, a path for my life, I found that there are hundreds, thousands of people who are really after the same thing. So it's really what I've been doing for the last 20 years is walking beside leaders who are trying to, squeeze every minute out of every day. That might make some people feel tense, but that's actually not what it's. That's really not the idea, squeezing every minute out of every day as much as being purposeful.
Yeah.
So, if I'm sitting on a beach for an hour doing nothing and that's purposeful, then that's a good thing.
And we kind of talked about that a little bit in the previous episode, but I mean, I kind of want to hang out there. Can you talk to us about the type of person that you have to be to see time in that way? Because I feel like, once again, especially as a young leader, I don't know if it's feeling like I have to prove something and I have to make every second count. And so that turns into activity and not even, purposeful activity. It's just activity for the sake of activity to say that, or feel like I'm doing something valuable. But with the playbook in mind, how do we get to a place where we're even able to rest intentionally?
Yeah. Well, everybody's wired just a little bit differently. I think a lot of us share the same core principles. If we don't, we should, because most of the core principles that I've discovered in life come from creation, and so they, speak to all of us. And so we have a conversation with those principles to try to navigate our lives. I, for one, I guess the words to describe me that kind of pushed me in this direction of trying to get my ducks in a row, so to speak, is I found out that I was very much a type A person. I don't know if we use that terminology as much as we used to 20, 30 years ago, but it's basically, hyperactivity. Just always feel like you got to do something. You got to be getting something done. It's probably attached to your values somehow. You probably need to get some counseling to get that, to get that straightened out. If you're not achieving or you're not achieving as much as you want, but you're on the go, kind of a life on adrenaline, maybe.
Mm,
So that that's one example of, and then I would think the other thing that is true for many Type A folks, not all but many, is that we have a history of not finishing what we started,
mm,
because as we got into it a little more, we're going, why am I doing this anyway? So we didn't put enough time on the front end, which is all playbook, conversation. So in life, you can't have it all, but you can sure have a lot, especially the stuff that you really want to have, if you know how to say no,
mm,
to things as well.
mm. That's really good. Grayson, can you talk to a time, whether past or even current tension, where maybe you didn't do your due diligence on the front end and you committed to something and then you get into it, as Jim's saying, and you're like, I don't even know why I committed to this, or maybe just not finishing well?
Oh yeah, I've got an endless list. But right off the bat, I think about, we all go to church together in our small group communities. I have a tendency to have these lofty goals, right? I want to do good in the community, want to build great friendships, want to be a great husband. And another thing on that list is I want to spiritually grow, and I wanted to take that next step and lead small groups, and uh,
And you want to be physically fit.
be physically fit, get great sleep, yeah, eat healthy,
Make a bunch of money. Oh,
yeah,
save the world.
yeah. And so I had committed to lead some small groups at a time where I had a bunch of other things going on, which at the end of the day I told myself, just stop making excuses. If it's important, do it. But also didn't stop to pause and realize the season I was in. And then I realized that I was doing everything kind of 50%, and then I felt horrible about that. And this playbook, I mean, it's just a perfect example of something that I wish I would have had.
Mm.
And still, I still need to go actually make mine.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to learn how to do that effectively, because
Yeah.
that's not gonna be the last time that I have these lofty goals that I want to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Jim, give us a snapshot of like what does that work on the front end kind of even look like before we overcommit to something and not finishing well?
Yeah, I mean, without using all my, gadgets and widgets and phrases, I think that a lot of truth for most people is that, do we even spend enough time in our lives just evaluating, our lives? I call it the good, bad, and ugly. Just sit down on a regular basis. I'm not talking about once in your life, but on a regular on a regular basis. What's the good in my life?
what would
Um,
you say is regular basis, like
yeah, I mean,
weekly?
no, it's a great question. It probably changes to the degree of frustration that
Mm,
I might, be in, because I don't know that, if your life is like out of control, you can't sit down for an hour and get it all figured out, but you got to start. So, I mean, I don't know that I go through the good, bad, and ugly every month, but I certainly go through it quarterly. And I'm not, and even though my habits on my playbook tell me to sit down and do it, quarterly, I've been doing it for so long that I can. It's kind of like a haircut. I don't know how often you guys get a haircut, but I can tell 3 weeks in it's time. I can just tell. And sure enough, I'll look at the calendar and I'll go, doggone it, I'm 2 days over 3 weeks or 2 days short of 3 weeks, and it's there. So now for me, it's just like there's this voice that says, all right, sit down, take a look at your course. Are you still heading in the right direction? And there's all kinds of questions you can ask yourself besides the good, bad, and ugly that maybe we'll get into. But yeah, so for me, it's at least quarterly. But if somebody is in crisis, I mean, it might be a daily thing that they're working on it daily for a half hour, at a time, depending upon how crazy their life is and what they're trying to what they're trying to do. But the reason why I say good, bad, and ugly is because one of the other contributing factors to a life out of control that is not effective is a lack of gratitude,
Mm.
where we don't sit and really think about all the blessings that we have. And when we do that, a lot of times it takes some of that misguided um, ambition. I mean, ambition's a good thing, but there is misguided ambition, and sometimes that comes from insecurity. That this isn't a therapy session, but a lot of times it can come out of therapy where while you're chasing, whatever success is. And then the bad, there's just three extremes here. The bad might be, not so good, or maybe I'm just too busy. That could be bad. So it's not like, you're in a fight for your life with cancer. And then ugly might be, man, this something's got to stop. This is going to kill me, literally, or whatever. They're going to kill my relationship or whatever it is at some point.
As you were talking, I was just thinking about how any master of their craft, things just start to come natural, the muscle memory, instinct.
Yeah.
But that's never the case right away. It requires intentionality and good work ethic and proper steps to be taken. So going through the good, bad, and ugly exercise, what does that look like for someone that's never done it before to get that rhythm going, like practically? Is it blocking off a day and going out doing like some sort of retreat by yourself, or I guess it might just depend on where you feel the most introspective? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot just working with leaders, and I've learned to get a lot more confident about direction in working with somebody versus fishing. A lot of times I go fishing. I try to understand who you are and what have you. But I have noticed over the last 20 years there is a consistent practice that I really am a bit forceful in and asking people to do. So, for example, I took on 3 new clients just this last couple of weeks, and the first thing I notice is how computer driven we all are. We take notes on our phone, we take notes on our computers, and we all know the benefit of that. There's a lot of benefit. But one thing that slows you down is when you have to actually pull out a pen or a pencil. And so there's certain mechanics that will slow you down. The laptop doesn't slow me down. The laptop speeds me up. And sometimes, and again, it's amazing what it does. I'm not a techie, but I use technical tools for sure in areas other than my personhood. My personhood is so important. So anyway, I asked all 3 of these guys, what their habits were, and none of them mentioned journaling, right? And I asked all 3 of them, would you be willing to buy a journal? And if you don't use it for anything else, you use it for our conversations. Things that you want to write down, things I will ask you to write down. I'm going to ask you to draw all kinds of different diagrams, and what have you. And the thing that I have to be careful with is not every client is wired the same. So some are very ashamed of their penmanship, and but when I even talk about that, a lot of their penmanship problems is not for everybody, but a lot is the speed in which they write. That their anxiety, and this is studies will show you this, their anxiety is so high that they can't write fast enough. And so they're inconsistent. They'll slant left, they'll slant right, they'll write up straight up and down. Sometimes it's print, sometimes it's cursive, depending upon how old they are. Some don't even know how to write cursive, and then some struggle with spelling. Right? It's just not their thing. So I recognize that there are some of those obstacles, but what I usually do, Grayson, is I usually work on everybody slowing down. How's that cliche? Go slow to go fast. Is that how it goes? You've heard that?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, go slow to go fast. I think it's kind of like a golf swing. They say go slow to go smooth, and go smooth to go fast. And when you skip those steps, then the wrestler in me takes over with a golf club in my hand, and that is an ugly swing, right? And the baseball player in me, who takes a golf swing as if it were a baseball bat, is not as ugly as a wrestler swing, but it's still ugly. And so, the principle is there. It's really about slowing down and, retreats. I don't know. I don't know. I would say that some people don't even know how to do a retreat. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves. So what I try to do is I try to say, and then the first thing I get them to do with their new journal, once I see it, and I say, okay, I want you to write a mission statement. I don't talk about purpose statements yet or anything like that. I take one step at a time. So write a mission, and it's usually job related because they're moving. Even though I recommend that we start with the personal playbook, almost everybody wants to fire me right away because they want to get involved in their work. Thus the problem. So sometimes I feel like I almost have to give them a pill and allow them to do that a little bit. And so the way I give myself time to get them back into the personal playbook is I say, all right, write a mission statement for your role in your company. And then I talk about what that looks like. And because a mission statement is not a sexy statement, it says, like the one that I read, I think it was today or yesterday, his first two words in his mission statement was about bringing growth to the company. And then the last part of his mission statement was his how, by, and he had, I think, 4 things that he was going to concentrate to do that. It was written pretty well. And I said, okay, that's the mission statement. Now, how are you going to block time? Because that's your quadrant 2. When you write a mission statement, you have just identified your quadrant 2, mystery solved. Now, show me your calendar. Oh, well, why do I got to show you? Well, you wrote a mission statement. Where's the evidence that you've invested that time in that? And he goes, boy, I don't think I want to show you that. And I go, okay. And so then I use what I'm saying, Grayson, is then I usually get their attention to where they'll go, oh, this is why we need to work on the personal side. This is why we need to, slow down. So the first thing I'm trying to do is exactly your question. Where can I help this person slow down? I'm looking for any spot, any place, anything. I mean, take, for example, what I sometimes do that after a while, my spirit says, stop it. Right. So I'm always trying to parallel things. I'm trying to squeeze every task of every moment. So even when I go for a run, do I listen to music? No, that's a waste of time. I'm not going to listen to music. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to listen to something that will teach me about something.
Compound activities.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but when I get done with that run, I will say this: wow, that run went by really fast. I forgot about that. So that's a good side of it because I was concentrating on something else. But for some reason, I don't feel like I'm getting that benefit of blowing out the carbon, so to speak, where I'm looking at the oak trees. I'm feeling the breeze, and then I'm struggling a little bit. I had to work through that struggle. There's a lot of benefits. So sometimes, I'm not saying that I go silent every time I run, because that's not true. Sometimes I do listen to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. But I have learned that one of the ways I slow down is if you go for a run, dang it, go for a run and do that and that alone.
Presence.
Being
present.
Presence. Because I'm already anxious. Because on my to-do list for the day is to listen to that podcast. But I also got to exercise. And I also got to be somewhere by such and such a time. So what I got to do is
You're speaking to me right now, because I try to work out in the morning. We have a home gym. So wake up, go out there, and I just start looking at my calendar because I'm very client facing. So I'm looking at who I'm meeting with, and I start thinking about what I have to do to prepare. So how do you avoid that?
Remind us of what you do again.
Financial advising. I'm a financial advisor. So.
And you're building your book of business, right?
Yeah. So I can't, I'm not in coasting mode, I have to. And so something else I was thinking about as you were talking was just inherently our society now, my generation, we view action as progress. And that's not always true.
That's, and I think that's what we're learning.
Yeah.
Because the whole time management thing has gotten to such a place where we're cutting, every hour into 15-minute, sections. And, if you work for certain high-strung corporations, they'll actually encourage you to do time audits, which I do as well. But they're looking at every 15 minutes. If you take an hour to meet with a colleague, they're thinking you could have probably done that in 15 minutes. And that might be true. But do you see where I'm going? We just keep pushing, pressing. I'll give you another example, Greyson. How many times do you go from one appointment to the next with even wondering whether you have taken a breath? So sometimes what I do is I say, look, you are forbidden to have an appointment that ends at 2 and your next appointment starting at 2. What you need to do is you have to, then let's throw that 15-minute thing in there again. You got to at least have 15 minutes, but it's not to catch up in the email, the text. It's to get up and to walk around the building, say hi to a few people, go get a soda, go get a water, whatever you're going to do, and just give yourself a break. Back to what you said, Winston, presence. Because, just changing the channel, and I catch myself, doing that, particularly when it comes to D-Day. I don't know what your guys' D-Day is, but, I have a D-Day, meaning if everything doesn't get done that I had hoped to get done this week, today, because tomorrow I'm supposed to have a day off, and I have a wife that holds me really accountable to that. So D-Day would be the day before that. So it could possibly be a 12-hour day, 14-hour day. And then by the time I get to my day off, I'm so stinking exhausted and stressed out that I'm on adrenaline. And what do I remember when I wake up? What I forgot to do. And it haunts me and chases me. So then I find myself hiding from my wife to get that thing, that thing done. This is craziness. It's craziness.
Can you, I want to tag back to something you kind of mentioned in passing, but can you clarify to us the difference between a mission statement and a purpose statement?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. So for example, let's go back to the example I gave earlier. And most of the leaders that I work with, once I kind of go over the Tinker Toy process, the building blocks of a mission statement, very rarely does someone submit one to me and I go, oh, this is horrid. This is horrid. So it tells me that, most people are very intellectual. They understand it. They get it. And they're going to show it to me. So there's some accountability there, right? So they're working on it. I mean, some are better than others. Let me answer it broadly and then specifically. Broadly, those are two different words, mission and purpose. And they're not synonyms. They might be cousins, but I think they're distant cousins. And the example that I use, here in this studio, I see a banner for the Coast Guard, see a banner for the United States Air Force. I see one for the United States Navy. When you ask our military what their purpose is, they'll say something like, protect our borders and our Constitution, something like that. That'll be their purpose. Ask them how many missions they have, and they will look at you in the eye and say, it's innumerable. We are in all kinds of missions all over the world. Missions begin and they end. Okay, so that's the broad definition. So the purpose is ongoing for as long as you exist, and the mission is I liken missions to goals, to be frank. Now you can have a mission and then have goals underneath that, supporting that, but even that gets messy and confusing, and maybe we can talk about that later. A purpose is it's why you're alive. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. It's why you're alive, and you can have different language for it. My personal mission is what I think a lot of believers in Christ is. In two words, it's following Christ. That's my personal mission. And then my mission statement is knowing Christ, following Christ, becoming like him, and reproducing his life in others. That's my personal mission statement. It's a foundation, for my life. But my my purpose statement, which is so what I do is, I have this foundational purpose statement, but then I have this what I would call professional purpose statement, which is shaping leaders. And I thought about it. Where could I not be involved in shaping leaders? Because I'm just a nut when it comes to shaping leaders. I don't, I study coaches who win, and they get fired and they go to another organization and they win. And they take a rebuilding program and they win. You don't hear from them for a few years because they're rebuilding, but all of a sudden they come out and they're winning again. That's amazing to me, and I think about executives who win. I think about some of the friends that I have and they just win. So what I do is when I think about, it's just true. I just love leadership. It doesn't mean I'm the best leader in the world, but it means I love leadership.
That's good.
I love it. And shaping leader. And so I really like working with people who are trying to make a difference. That's kind of some of the wiser. And here's my theory. I want to reach thousands of people. I do. I'll admit that to you. I want to influence thousands of people, but I've never bought into the addition thing. I've never bought into how can I have 5 million followers? I don't even know what that looks like. Why do they follow me? Because of a cool YouTube deal that went on? Are they really followers? I mean, are they? But I bet you, I have a pretty good chance of influencing in a significant way 500 leaders. And if not 500 leaders, maybe 250. And if not 250, maybe 100. And if not 100, maybe 50. And if not 50, maybe 10. And I believe that leaders are the kings and queens of the world, and they're the ones that have influence on others. So I've always kind of viewed it in a multiplying way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I get up thinking about leadership, and yeah, I beat myself up a lot, because I'm a human being just like you guys are. And so a lot of times my report card doesn't look so great, especially when you go self-awareness, self-leadership, leading others, leading healthy organizations. Those are the 4 areas of concentration that I work on.
You kind of touched on the idea of that's what you love to do, attached to your purpose statement. Maybe talking to somebody listening, trying to wrestle down their purpose statement. Is that a symptom, or is that a breadcrumb? Like, man, I love this thing. Is that where they start? Like, where would they even?
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody arrives at it, differently. I think some people, because of their childhood or for whatever reason, really want to make a lot of money. And so for them, it doesn't really matter. I mean, assuming honestly, they want to make a lot of money honestly. It doesn't really matter whether they buy boring businesses or whether they want to be a Wall Street tycoon or whether they want to be a corporate, leader. A lot of them don't really care so much about the mode. They care about, the goal of that. And then you have those who are entrepreneurs who the thought of going into a stuffy office and working just, drives them crazy. I think everybody kind of searches, for that. I think what my wife and I learned in our late 20s was that I've got this thing that I want to do. Why does that burn in my belly so much? And what if it doesn't pay? What if I can't, support my family? And of course, mentors are good only for the path that they have taken. And so if you can't find a mentor that fits your path, that sounds like trouble. And it could be trouble but I had mentors who were for what I was doing and mentors that were against what I was doing. But in the long run, what we decided is that we were going to do what we really believed we were here to do. And then we weren't going to be poor, and we were going to use our entrepreneurial gifts to do what we can, but that wasn't our focus. That was almost like, it's like Paul's tent making. For those who aren't familiar, the Apostle Paul, the first church planter, yes, he took out some offerings here and there, but for the most part, he made it on his own. You know, I think that's a great question. I don't know that there's a formula. And people try to do seminars and sell tickets so that you can figure that out. I'm a little cynical, and I'm cynical in a lot of stuff. But I think leadership is a dialogue. I think leadership is done best in community. It's done best in encouraging one another. Figuring it out can be really frustrating if you think you gotta have it down pat, or it can be a journey that you enjoy. And I think that though there's been times where I've been frustrated, for the most part, I really like the idea. I tried that. Nope. Let's try this. And I've been okay with that.
There have been seasons in my life where I've looked back and I thought, what was that even about? Did I grow in that season? Did I get better? Am I still stuck in that season? If you have similar thoughts, I want to introduce you to a book called Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past. This book, written by Jim Piper, shares principles and stories that actually help us get unstuck and step into the future we've always wanted. Be sure to stop by leadtodaycommunity.com to grab your copy today.
Something that just keeps popping up in my head. I kind of an overanalyzer on a lot of things. And so I want to normalize like the process of the playbook. Because to me, in my mind, I know it's not something that you just set it and it's set in stone. It is kind of a living document.
It's dynamic.
But I want to know like how regular is it acceptable for it to be reviewed? Obviously not like changing, every week or every month, but there's different stages of life and stuff. And I think it's probably hard, I know for me, but probably for a lot of people watching or listening, to put it down on paper with the thought that like, this is it. It needs to be perfect. That's the side of the table I always sit on.
So how often reviewed, but I guess also how often can we adjust it? Because you don't want to adjust it every day.
Yeah, the component. Let's talk about the components, at least of what I've designed, and then go into that. And now, I'm not going to give it to you in order. I'm going to give it to you in viewing order. So, and I worked with some psychologists who understand how the brain works and how I even put it together on paper. But on the top left is a vision statement. It's very short. It's a vision statement. Underneath the vision statement are values, and I have spots for no more than 5. And then underneath the value statement, I have my purpose statement, if it is a personal playbook, and then because there's a personal playbook, a professional playbook, and a team playbook. And then if I didn't already say it, there are the two keywords, which is the shortened version of the purpose statement or mission statement. And so, like I said before, in my case, shaping leaders. That's the top half on the left side. On the right side is what I call KPAs, key performance areas. That's the subject matter and I give up to 5 of those. And then there's a goal statement underneath each of those, and then goal steps underneath each of those. There's 5 of those. So that concludes the top half. The bottom half is a list of, there's a section there that kind of lists my personality type and my strengths. And then there is on the left side, areas of character that I think I need to rely on, work on in this season of my life. And then to the right of that is what I call habits. Those are things that are broken down daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and annually. I look at I look at, or I tell people I look at, or I tell myself I look at and review the playbooks every week. Do I actually do that every week? I would say out of 52 weeks, probably 40 times, just to give you an example. There's a lot of reasons for that, and some of the reasons aren't good because I'm a human being. But I find it's kind of like a lot of people who are so-called experts in your physical health. And you're trying to lose weight, as an example, which for me is always a battle now that I'm 65. And if I look at a carbohydrate, it sticks to me and multiplies. I find they'll say weigh once a week. That doesn't work for me. I have to weigh every day. I weigh every day, and yes, I go through an emotional roller coaster. But it's better for me to do that and be off a half a pound or even maybe a full pound, because then I can make it's short accounts and I can make immediate adjustments. I am capable of thinking I did okay this week and gain 5 pounds in 1 week. Now that is a punch in the gut because I know how hard it is for me to get that off. So with that same analogy, I am pretty regular at looking at my playbooks, but here's why, Grayson, because I can't do my calendar without looking at my playbook, because my playbook informs my calendar informs my daily activities. And that's how I can be stubborn against a noisy world that wants to interrupt me and take their own agenda and force it on my own. And so that sounds arrogant, but hold on. I have met with God about this playbook. I have met with my family and my significant others about this playbook. This is our general agreement as to our approach. And of course, that playbook involves serving others. It involves caring for the customer. It involves all of those things. Now, does that mean that I won't respond to friends, colleagues, family, emergencies? Of course not. But those who work closely with me, I'm not going to go into detail, but they get it.
If I can tag in real quick, some of what you're saying makes me think about the person who's not currently using this, who needs it, and maybe they find themselves almost held hostage to all of the relationships, all of the responsibilities that they feel like they have to respond to. And I think it's a real thing. People trying to reconcile how do I stay loyal, maybe is a word. How do I stay loyal to people that have quote unquote been loyal to me, but that ends up with diminishing returns because you've not taken care of yourself, you've not led yourself. So your desire is to actually serve people well, but you can only serve people at the level that you've taken care of yourself. So how does the playbook help the person who is almost stuck just reacting to the responsibilities of those around them, maybe even specifically just quote unquote trying to be a good person and helping others?
It's super frustrating, because most problems are systemic in nature. They're not good guy, bad guy kind of thing. A lot of organizations have addiction to meetings. And the reason why is because they still haven't figured out how to do meetings. I think that's where Patrick Lencioni's work about all the different types of meetings and how to put those together. And then, of course, you mentioned family, then there's family expectations, on top of that. And then, of course, we are our own worst enemy. We have to throw ourselves into that pot of stew. So, whatever working environment we're in it. So we're part of that system. Whatever family environment we're in, we're in it. And then there's us. And then there's our goals and dreams. And then there's taking care of us, everything you just said. And it really is tough. And that's why most of my work is really with people who either are in a position where if they want to change their behavior, they can. And usually in the corporate world, if you're familiar with these terms, anybody from a director up maybe a manager, but a lot of times managers are a little too a little too lower elevation, to really have that kind of swagger. They're still kind of developing the task orientation, the trust and getting stuff done with their two or three, team members, what have you. But when someone gets promoted to a director level, VP and up, they're kind of expected to run their organization. However, the reason why they struggle is because they've never learned how to do it, because they were a contributor and then got promoted to a manager. And then all of a sudden, the manager to a director is a big leap. And then the leap from a director to a VP is a really big leap because it goes completely into abstract. A VP's role is 80% abstract, generally speaking, 20% of the systems in there. Entrepreneurs, usually the problem there is them. They are usually the problem. Yes, they have customers, but they're not backing away from it. Those in middle management, so you bring up a really good point. So I think what I do with somebody who feels that they're trapped in that kind of a world, as I said, you'll be surprised what your personal playbook can do. So you do your job, when you and I talk, just, try to cope with your job and don't bring your job into our conversation. Let's talk about your personal playbook. And we get that, because in that process, there's revelations that occur. There's courage that's given. There's insight that's given. Oh, there's a promotion that happens, and those things happen. And then, so, even though my playbook looks nice and neat and you guys are looking at it and you say, is his life really like that? 75%, it is. It is. Did it get there overnight? No, it has been a fight. It's a fight, and it's still a fight. It's still a fight, because every organization that I get involved with, they typically agree to a pound of your flesh, but next thing you know, you got 10 pounds missing. And, so that whole boundary thing is really tough. You got to be forthright, communicate. I would really love to do this well. I'm going to have to, and you're having to, the more you keep it to yourself, the more you stuff, the more, the ugly stuff starts developing inside of you. And then when it finally comes out, people are going to say, what happened? What happened to that guy? He just flipped a switch. He seemed like a normal guy. Oh, at that boat and we blew up. What happened? So, I just recognize that it is a difficult, process, and thus that is why it's worth beginning the journey, of it. I was hoping I was going to have grandkids, but my 7 grandkids, I love them to death. They are all very demanding. They think they're the boss of me, and to be honest, I don't want to let them down. So, what is that psychology? I don't know. I need to lay on the couch and talk about it probably, but so it never ends is my point. It never ends. If you throw in the towel of trying to live a more effective life now because you think some magical way in 10 years it'll come, it's not going to come.
That is discouraging. It's just not going to happen. We're just not going to wave a magic wand and our life is going to get more organized. I recently, heard this, from the Christian perspective. Many of us are praying for peace, but we're trying to bypass the process of God's order.
Yeah.
And that God is a God of order. And so peace is the byproduct of order and intentionality. And we're praying for the wrong thing. we're praying for peace, but we're not willing to engage in an orderly approach to then experience peace or sustain it, right? And so I think that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Getting things in order, getting things appropriately. Back to the kind of the sensitivity that Jim spoke to earlier, the recognition that something is out of order. Greyson, where have you found there's been a light flashing on the dashboard kind of telling you this needs to be reprioritized? What is that experience currently like? And maybe where do you feel like you need, additional support, maybe that the playbook might be able to add value to that experience?
Well, I feel like right now my life is just a big game of whack-a-mole. Honestly, like there's something over here. Oh, hit that one, then something crops up over here, and it's getting faster and faster. And then right whenever I feel like I hit the last one, this thing comes out at the top right corner. And so, especially when it comes to relationships, I'm real good about, making time for my wife. And then it's the family and friends aspect of it. I'll kind of go through a season where I'm real intentional with going to lunch with people, hanging out with friends. But then next thing you know, it's been a month since I've talked to my parents. So then I'm like, shoot, I need to go spend time with my parents. Then next thing you know, I haven't spent any time with Tess at home. And so it's like I can get 2 of the 3, but I can't get 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of been a theme for me, which is why I love these conversations. And I really want to sit down and do the playbook. But again, analysis paralysis, I want to do it right. So it's encouraging to hear that it's not something that is a tool that needs to be used exactly like that forever. It can be modified. But yeah, I'd say relationships is the big one for me.
Yeah, I think most people feel that same way. I don't think it happened. Well, it did kind of happen to me too, going back to the Covey stuff, because I was a follower of Covey, and everything in those days was done manually. You bought the expensive leather binder and all of that, and how frustrating it was when I would do my values, and then I go, no, these aren't my values, and I mean, who knows how many stabs which is really kind of scary, because you're going, man, what do you really, value? I think a lot of the work for us, this is really hard to say, but I think the work is eliminating. It's the process of eliminating. Now, if you're a catalytic individual like I am, an activator, no matter how self-aware I am, Lent just gets on me. And about, every 9 months to 18 months, I'm looking at this playbook, and all of a sudden I'm going, this playbook is pregnant. This is stupid. This is not how you do a playbook. Now I've been rationalizing for that amount of time, adding, more. So I have to cleanse again. Now my personal playbook rarely changes. So that's the good news. It's slowly but surely evolves into a constitution. I think we talked about that last time. And a constitution shouldn't change much, but it takes a while to get it there. But once it's there, now you got a foundation in which to build, because you won't betray it. So anything that you build on top of it, your professional playbook, will be supported by something that is solid. And one of the things that we talked about, I think we talked about this last time, but when we talked about the person, people, place idea, that everything flows out of my person and overflows into my people, my relationships, and then into my place, wherever I find myself in life. But one of the hard things to do about the people part is we just can't be effective having these ideal relationships with X amount of people. And each of us has probably more capacity than others. There's probably a variety of reasons that, go into that. So we kind of have to figure out. So if you take that people circle and then you break it out by itself, and I'm making this up right now as I go, but if you were to break those down into, say, 3 categories, your core people, and then the people that you want to be more than just cordial with, but you're not going to have the same commitment to these. It sounds weird to have to do that, doesn't it? It seems like relationships should be more fluid than that. But if and I don't think you walk around showing people which circle they're in. But if you don't know which circle they're in,
that's good. And
then you're going to make decisions that are going to affect other people in the other circle in a way that it shouldn't. And so your people priorities are out of order because somehow you forgot that you have limited capacity.
That's really good. I've actually heard somebody frame it as just like we talk about emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, like being able to basically put the appropriate weight and value on relationships. I know personally in my playbook journey, my leadership journey, just self-awareness journey, I'm learning my relational tank is small in the sense of I don't need much to fill that tank. But others, maybe highly relational, have a large tank, and so need or capacity to have maybe another angle for it. And so just that variation in the nuance of being sensitive and aware, like what do I need, what do I require, am I overextending myself? Because there's this unspoken pressure, this weird expectation that I need to have X amount of people in my life, or the other side of it, I don't have enough people in my life, and I'm doing that subconsciously. Like I think it is fluid in the sense of am I slowing down enough to recognize, okay, what is required of me, what do I need, and then from there I'm able to in my playbook map out, okay, let me be intentional with my relationships, and then we see that on our calendar if I'm getting that correct.
Yeah, several years ago, I mean several, maybe a couple decades ago, I had a friend put me in my place, literally. I never really thought about relationships in the way we're talking about them. That realization, because at that time, Jim and my son and my daughter were still living with us at home. They're middle school, high school, I think. And I still had a lot of energy. And so I just didn't really give it much thought. And, but I had this one friend who I liked playing golf with, and we had an affinity in golf, and we were both pastors, and so we had that affinity. But he would call me quite often to do other things than just golf, and I won't go into them. But he would, all kinds of stuff, and I keep finding excuses, to tell him not to go. One day he literally says to me, Jim, I think that I'm projecting upon you something that you don't want. So I'm going to put you in my golf friend section. I went, am I being demoted? But what was funny is I was relieved when he said it, because I love playing golf with him. But my life had more demands than, two married dudes. I'm a married dude. Maybe I'm looking at it differently, and I've got kids and a wife, and they play ball, and there's other affinities, that are going on. I think sometimes we just get too idealistic, or maybe we don't spend enough time, whatever category, it is, and thinking through it. It's probably about the best I can, offer there. Other than this too, maybe we shared this before. Bill Hybels shared many years ago. For some reason, I got a lot of content in the late 1980s that stuck. I don't know why, but I did. But Bill Hybels, there was a series that they were doing that was literally about burnout. They're talking about burnout. And Bill Hybels got up and he said, there's three kinds of relationships that you need to be aware of. And he said, and this is how he laid them out. He said, there are neutral relationships. He says, let's just call them friendship. It's kind of give and take. Some days you're there for your friend. Someday your friend is there for you. But a lot of times when you're together, it's not really about much. You're lifting weights, you're doing this, you're doing that. And he goes, everybody needs some of those. He says, and then there are filling relationships. And he looked at us, he says, I want to ask you right now, write down the people in your life that no matter who they are, when you're around them, you just walk away a better person. You just know, and that got me thinking, gosh, how many? And then he also said to us, and if you don't have anybody physically, at least go adopt them, find their books, read them, let them speak to you, kind of give you that temporary thing. And then he said, the third category is draining relationships. He said, you go in with a good attitude, but somehow, some way, by the time you leave that relationship, you're a dead man in the water. You're a dead man walking. You're exhausted. You're just completely spent. And he looked at us and he said, you all need a draining relationship.
Mm.
And he goes, did you hear me? Ship, not ships. He says, because it probably takes 2 or 3 filling relationships to cover for your draining relationship. And I felt so free after he said that, because one of my dysfunctions, and I have many, but one of my dysfunctions is my typical default is being a rescuer. And someone will say, will you help me? What do you think about? And that's probably part of a psychological pattern that I picked up, in the family tree, but also probably is a catalytic thing that, hits that spoke. And I often found through the years, finding myself committing to a relationship that their view of it and my view of it was really different. Because I am pretty good at saying, all right, here's the 3 things you need to do. I just, it's just, but I'm not the kind of guy that says, so let's meet every Thursday morning for coffee to talk about it. No, I'm out. Those are the 3 things you're supposed to do. If you want to call me in a month, let me know anything. We can talk about that. But, I never had that. Language is important. Language, language helps. And even with clients, I have found not all my clients should be draining relationships. They shouldn't be. And so I practice that as well, and those, sometimes I fire myself because I go, for whatever reason, when I get done with this call, I'm done for 3 hours. That ain't good.
It's almost like, to the point of, language is powerful and it's necessary. The playbook can give us this kind of language for our life in a way that, at least the way I'm synthesizing this, is it gives us courage to cut. It gives us a framework for freedom. Like, sometimes we just get so inundated with, once again, our responsibilities, our expectations, the things we want to do, the things we have to do, and we don't even, once again, kind of know where to start. And the playbook forces us into this process that gives us the courage after we come out of it to say, all right, I know what is valuable. I know what is taking me in the direction I want to go versus what's pulling me away from it. And, without this, this rallying point, without this place, that almost can become this place of respite, man, I can't wait to get to my playbook and just kind of just assess, like, where am I? Like, where am I in the last 9 months, 18 months? How did I pick up all this lint, if you will? How did these things accumulate? And I would imagine, Jim, you could speak to it, but you learn more, not just about, the logistics of your life, but you learn about yourself so much in the process of, like, why do I keep letting that relationship come in? Why do I keep putting myself out there? What are my bents and my proclivities that keep taking me away from my mission and my purpose? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, you're getting into some really deep stuff. There's a thing in psychology called a father wound, and we, my dad is here right now, and great man, been a great father. But we're so delicate, growing up. It's the little things that can throw us off. I think for those of us who are Christians, we can get this Messiah complex. We're unconscious about it, meaning that we think very idealistically. We say it in church all the time. We are the hands and the feet of Jesus. And who's going to stand up and argue with that, right? I mean, that seems to make sense, right? Jesus told us to go and make disciples. So, that seems to line up pretty well there. But somehow we take our eyes off of the bigger picture, and we look at this man called Jesus, who the Bible says that he was born of a virgin, and he lived a sinless life, and he was crucified, and he was raised by God, and then he ascended to heaven, and he's coming back. That's what the Bible teaches about him. So I don't know anybody else that has that resume. And yet he himself would run away to get space, to pray, to get his head on straight. This is perfect humanity, by the way. Perfect humanity. Even if he wasn't tapping into his God nature, and I don't know how all that worked, but it's pretty clear that most of his adult life, he lived in perfect humanity, even though he's fully God, fully man. Yes, that's what the Bible teaches. Yet he worked mostly through 3 and then 12. He didn't have time for all of his family. And so guilt and shame is still very much alive, is what I'm trying to say, in us, to where maybe there is a ploy for every leader to know all the answers. So those who are listening, and you're a leader, we're not just talking about ministry. You know, you're a leader, and you feel the vibes that you should know the answers. And so you make guesses when you don't know, versus being able to say, I don't know. Or you say yes when you really should say no. And I can't, I'm tired. I need to rest. I need to think. And if our bottom line motive is to serve the best we can, then I want to come back to a lot of this is eliminating, so that what we do really, really well. Not to a perfectionist point of view, because life is messy, and ministry is messy, and leadership is messy. So, we got to drop the report card thing, because that just radiates too much guilt and shame. But if we could put on the idea of learning together, traveling together, make sure that, Jonathan Moore said in a gathering this week, that lions hang out with lions. And of all the things that he said about lead like a lion, I really resonated with that, because I tend to see the needs around me and go to those needs, and they deplete me. And so when you're depleted on the couch, you're not only are you not helping those people, but you don't have the strength to go hang out with lions. And so, really reserving some of your time for yourself to hang out with lions. I thought that was a good point, that he made. I don't know if I'm answering.
Yeah. No, I mean,
that's good stuff. Yeah.
I think the way that, maybe we land the plane is getting so clear about your life, getting so clear about what matters, that it becomes very clear about what doesn't matter. And I think we're plagued in 2025 with the lack of clarity. Even in the church space, I hear people praying for, I want clarity, but the process it takes to get clarity. Yeah. Clarity is not a destination. It's not an instant, gratification thing where I'm just going to wake up one day. If I just pray really hard, if I just, do a quote unquote the right thing, I buy the right ebook, I get the right, I follow the right influencer on social media, I'm going to get clarity. There, you can't shortcut clarity.
Can I make a comment on that before you land this sucker? And I want to make sure Greyson has time to say anything too. I watched a movie the other day, and it was really a bad movie. It was a true story, and I'll butcher the title if I try to remember it. But it was basically it was about soccer, and the soccer coach had lost his way because he went through a personal tragedy, and he was assigned to some podunk island in the middle of nowhere, and coaching these very poor soccer players. And anyway, he gets into this argument with the guy who is, let's just call him the president of the soccer club. And the coach, who had a good reputation for being a winner, but over the last few years, because of this tragedy, had been drinking too much. And, he just kind of lost his way, acting unbecomingly. And he says to the president, they're about to go into this playoff game, or actually this game to qualify to go to anything, that's likened to a tournament. That's how bad they were. And he says to the president, the coach says to the president, well, what if I lose? And the president said something that it just crushed my heart. He said, than lose with us.
Mm.
And because, see, he was still running. He was still running. He was still running. I think when we pray for clarity, basically that's cover for send me an angel.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think God is about sending angels for those of us who have faith. Yes, he has sent angels. But as I have read through the 66 books of the Bible, and not very often, now I do admit when I was 7 or 8 and 12 and 13 and maybe 15, I did pray for God to, send me an angel. None came that I know of. It is possible that some came and I didn't know. I don't know. But if you believe in this idealism that God is big enough to be small enough and we can actually have a relationship with him, what I love about my mom and my dad, my brothers and my sister, my blood family, is that no matter how high of a mountain I was on or how low of the valley I was on, they were there. They were there. So when blood acts like it's supposed to act in the long game, not always in the short game, but in the long game, you remember that. I think our walk with God and seeking for clarity comes from that relationship, just seeking that relationship, believing that he's with you in it and he's enjoying the journey. Are you enjoying the journey? Are you putting more pressure on yourself than you should? Now, granted, this playbook is no child's play. It's hard work, but you're doing it because you do believe you're made in the image and the likeness of God. And, like the Stoics often said, the more you pursue God, the more God pursues you, or the more you know yourself, the more you know God, the more you know God, the more you know yourself. So it's all about relationship. It really is. I can look at my playbook, you guys, and say, it may not be perfect, but I didn't do this on my own. And this is a family matter. This is my faith matter. This is a relationship with God, matter. And it's really helped me too, like because, I get down into it. And so a lot of times there's rejection. There's, someone that says, yeah, they don't want to do that. And, it's tough.
I think as you kind of were landing that plane there, it all comes down to authenticity, right? If you're going to create this playbook, you can't just put the values and the mission and the goals that you kind of know successful people are aspiring for. It's what are important to you. And a lot of people probably don't know because of all the reasons we've talked about, busyness, and they just can't stop to smell the roses. And that's step one. And I think that a lot of that, a successful introspective look at what your vision, what your goals are, is going to be rooted in relationship with God. And then also making it a family matter, the significant others around you. So I think everything we talked about today, as I was sitting here hearing you close that out, it's all rooted in the right playbook. It's got to be an authentic playbook.
Greyson, can I suggest something for you? Just listening to you talk.
Yeah, please.
So I've been learning, and I'm still learning how to do the playbooks better. And I put myself in your shoes while you were talking, and also while I listened to you last time. And I imagine what my playbook would have looked like 20 years ago with your agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell you that would have been the wrong way to do it. I did it wrong. What I would suggest to you is, I don't know, is what makes the playbook work is that you base your playbook on one main mountain that you're trying to climb. Because I've heard at least two. You're building a book of business, and so it'd probably be pretty easy to put together a SMART goal for that. And you're trying to get your MBA. You did mention more time with tests, more time here, physical, all that. That's noise. All that's noise. I don't even know if I have all of your elements, but I would probably say to you that on your personal playbook, but I don't know if your MBA is personal or professional. I don't know if you're doing it for personal reasons or if you're doing it for professional reasons. But I would probably have a talk with you and say, make a decision. You might say, well, the answer is both. And I'll say, no, wrong answer. That's the only wrong answer. It needs to be for one or the other. Of course, it's going to be 70-30 or 80-20. What I want to know is what's 51% true or more.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, and this is the psychological part that I've been learning, and how the brain works. I'm talking about the mind. To me, the brain and the mind are two different things. If you said that the MBA was professional in the long run, or if you did some soul searching and said, it's probably more for my confidence or whether I continue to pursue this or not, then it's personal, whatever. So in your personal playbook, you might have MBA. And on your professional playbook, you have a dollar amount that you're looking for in your book of business by such and such a time. Whew, that's a lot right there. That's a lot. Now, what about tests? Did we just leave tests in the sorry, Tess, I'll come back to see you after the MBA and I get that book of business. No, because the things that matter in your life are lined up to your values. So when you look at your visions, either your vision statement or your values, and you cross over to the other side of your playbook, that's where you're practicing those values. So if you have a value of family in some way, shape, or form, however you're going to state it, and then your goal statement and your habits are going to reflect that. But it doesn't mean that, you're such and such is a mountain, that you're trying to climb. That's another way you take the pressure off. You bring focus and intentionality in, because if you're pursuing the right goals on the way to achieving that goal, many of these other things just happen because you're reviewing the playbook and you're putting them on the calendar. Mm-hmm. And just to remind you guys, one of the really helpful things that I've learned is so the playbook, all right, I said all that to try to say this and almost forgot. The playbook isn't about all that you want to accomplish. It's not about everything that you do. The playbook is based upon seasons. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the personal, because that sooner or later gets to a constitution. But particularly that professional playbook, it is, what do you want to accomplish in this next season? It's about that. It's about that one thing. But Jim, I want to accomplish 4. Fine. Tell me the thing you want to accomplish. That's what your playbook is about.
Good.
And you will accomplish it. But if you accomplish those other 3 things and you didn't accomplish your number 1, you're not going to be happy. If you accomplish the number 1, you might find that 2 of those dropped off and you go, I didn't even care about that. I didn't know why I had that. And then the other one's rising up to be your next one. That's just, an example. But I wanted to give you some real live, that's kind of example. You don't need to list everything that you're chasing, right? I mean, I'm chasing 150 pounds, and it is buried in my personal playbook, but it is part of my rhythm. It is part of that. I don't wake up every day and go, all right, I'm going to forsake everything else for this 150. Now I could, and that may not be the wrong answer, but I'm telling you, on my personal playbook, that is not what I'm chasing on my personal deal. So last year when I wrote Story, the book, that was my number 1 professional goal. Did I want to start the podcast? Yes. Did I want to build a studio? Yes. Did I want to do X amount with whatever? Yeah. But I'm telling you, that's not what I was chasing. I was chasing, was getting that book done. That's what I was chasing. And then as I got smarter, I'm going, this book can be used in coaching. This book can be used in podcasting. This book can be, so you just kind of learn, as you go.
Mm-hmm. Real life clarity, real time clarity.
Yeah, good
coaching.
stuff.
Fun stuff.
Really, really good. Well, that is all we have for the Today Counts show. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you.
See ya.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us on the Today Counts show. We got so much more planned for you. So stay tuned and stay connected on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. And remember, today counts.